Hey guys, what is up and welcome back to the channel. So by the footage you can see on your screen right now, Breath of the Wild is now semi-working, we can say, on Yuzu, this Nintendo Switch emulator, and in this video we are going to take a look at exactly how it runs, in what kind of state its bootability is, and exactly what you can expect to see from this game on this emulator right now. To start things off, we are going to do a quick bootability test to see if this game requires game saves, or to see if we can just select new game from the title menu and get in game that way. To do that, we are going to have to exit to said title menu, where we are going to see some awesome improvements that we have seen in the last few versions of Yuzu. So there you go, you can now see that we have fully and correctly rendered fonts in The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, very similar to what we saw in Super Mario Odyssey, a game that is now fully playable on this emulator. You also see that all of these menus are fully and correctly rendered and working, but the next thing we want to do is to select new game and to see can we actually get into a new game without the emulator crashing or the game freezing. So for anybody who followed the progress of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild on Yuzu Emulator, you will be fairly familiar with this intro sequence where it's going to say Nintendo presents The Legend of Zelda and Breath of the Wild. So for now, I'm not really too sure if it is actually going to crash. As I said, this has never really gone in game in any of my testing before, so this is a fairly good signification that it is not going to crash, as this is the introduction cutscene in The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. For many people who played this game on Yuzu Emulator, you would also be very familiar with a very weird freezing bug that would generally happen on this exact screen. A lot of people have had issues, and even to this day still have issues with the game completely freezing and refusing to go in game upon a new game load. Hopefully we're not going to get stuck on this screen, and as I can kind of see, yeah, you can see it's kind of fading to black, and Open Your Eyes comes on this screen in a text box once again, which generally means we have loaded through this weird softlock issue that tends to happen to lots of people, and we should be able to actually get in game, which is absolutely amazing. So as you would have seen in the introduction to this video, the rendering isn't perfect. You can see some particles and some very weird rendered graphics, but we should be able to make some kind of distinction to the actual graphics in a few seconds. Now, I did see some screenshots that were put online by Hexagon, one of the mods on the Yuzu Discord, and yes, this is Link. I know you can only see his outline right now, but this is in fact Link in his, I guess, is it a bed? It's not really a bed, I suppose. It's like a regeneration chamber in the Shrine of Resurrection. And yeah, there you go. You can see Link sitting up, and we can semi-see some correctly, well, it's not correctly, but we can semi-see some rendered graphics in this area, the Shrine of Resurrection. So Breath of the Wild is a 30 FPS game, and as you can see by the frame counter down in the bottom right hand corner of the emulator window, we are running at around half speed. Even though it says 25 or 6%, it is running at half speed, as this game is a 30 FPS game, and for some reason some games that are 30 FPS games in Yuzu at this point in time don't display the correct speed, because I think all of the games are tied to like a 60 frames per second counter. But check it out, look at those graphics, that's so cool. Okay, so we are almost through this initial waking up sequence, and hopefully it's not going to crash before we actually get in game. As I said, okay, so you can see the pedestal where the Sheikah slate is, so we should be getting control in game anytime. Okay, so there we go. You can see our health signification in the top left hand corner. Our health meter in the top left hand corner, and we do indeed have in-game control. Now obviously the graphics aren't rendered even slightly correctly at all, but it's still really cool that we are in game and we are running at, to be honest, a better frame rate than Breath of the Wild ran at when Yuzu first booted the game. So we're running in and around anywhere between around 8 and 15 or 16 frames per second. So let's just see how far we can actually get into this game before we're either going to crash, or we're going to run out of RAM, or we're going to run out of VRAM on our GPU. There's going to be some weird issue, because generally when you have these weird kind of artifacts on screen, that tends to introduce either VRAM or RAM leaks, which will just make you run out of the memory, and then the emulator or the game will crash, or your computer might even softlock in some instances. Okay, so what we basically want to do is we want to try to get out of the Shrine of Resurrection as fast as we can, because we do actually need light sources in order to get some kind of semblance of rendered graphics. So we have the Sheikah slate, that's that part of the job done. So let's just try to get through these cutscenes and try to get out of the Shrine of Resurrection. So here we have the cutscene of the initial door opening, which we obviously can't see because the Sheikah, or not the Shrine of Resurrection, I mean, is completely engulfed in darkness. So let's just run out here, and I wonder, are we going to actually be able to get any of the chests? You can kind of see the glowing roof in the Shrine of Resurrection, which is kind of cool. That is semi, again, correctly rendered. So let's try to, okay, so here's one chest. This one should be the pants, I think. So yeah, it's not exactly the easiest thing to do to navigate around here, but this should be the pants. Yeah, we have the well-worn trousers. So now that we have the trousers, we can come to our inventory and we can equip them. It's actually a bit hard to press the inputs because the frame rate is actually so low that it's not detecting every input. So let's just come to our menu. In our menu, we're actually getting over 30 frames per second. So FPS++ for Yuzu Emulator confirmed. Maybe we'll eventually have some kind of dynamic FPS patch for maybe even Super Mario Odyssey and many games on this emulator. I guess only time will tell. So it is kind of hard to find the second crate because I kind of have lost. Okay, so there's the second crate. I'm gonna try get the top. You have no idea how hard this is. It's so difficult to try and navigate when you can't see anything. I guess I can kind of see the Sheikah slate on my side, but okay, come on. Where is this? Is it here? Here we go. There we go. So we should be opening the chest to get the old shirt. I was going to say well-worn shirt for some reason. It's well-worn pants and old shirt. So now that we have the pants and the shirt, let's reopen our inventory, put on the pants and the shirt, and we can just run forward now where we should see the pedestal. I think it's only glowing stuff like this, which is quite odd. It's quite odd that it's mostly the glowing stuff that is rendering right now. So here we are, we have the pedestal, and we're going to hold up the Sheikah slate, and that will open the door. And hopefully when this door opens, we're going to actually see some rendered graphics, because I believe that you need some semblance of light source in order to have the actual character textures to show up on screen. So let's just skip through the pedestal cutscene. We're going to hold up the Sheikah slate, and this should open up the main door, which will put us out into the open world. So are we going to see graphics? Authenticating, Sheikah slate confirmed, and once the door opens, we should see graphics technically. Come on, door, show us those graphics, show us those graphics. There we go. You can see we have some form of rendered graphics in The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. You can see Link's hair is rendered at least, which is kind of cool. I guess that's due to some kind of ambient light maybe that's catching on his hair. Maybe there's some weird shader that his hair uses that is correctly implemented right now. I'm not too sure why only his hair rendered there, but it's you are the light, our light. That's quite ironic that that's what comes up. But you can see, yeah, on the outskirts of our screen, you can see that we have some semi-rendered areas in this Shrine of Resurrection. So yeah, let's just try once again, skip through all of this and actually see, can we see any correctly rendered graphics? So we have control in the game again, so there you go, you can actually see. And how weird is that? If anyone who played either Breath of the Wild on the Wii, the Switch, or CEMU, you would remember that on Hyrule Bridge there was this weird glitch where you could go into this area that had this filter that gave you like no cell shading, and it appears that at least in this emulator right now that we have absolutely no cell shading on the Link character model, or on pretty much any of the textures in the world by the looks of it. Okay, so let's just try to run up the stairs, and if we oddly enough hold our camera here, we have rendered graphics, which is very, very weird, and we're running at around 10 to 12 frames per second. So does climbing work? Yes, climbing does work. Okay, so now that we're here, let's see if we can get a better look at the character model and see just how well it is rendered. Okay, so it's kind of annoying because once you get close, it kind of doesn't work, and you can see on Link's character model that he doesn't have any cell shading on his character. So weird. Okay, so let's run up to the top of this area where we're going to have some very, I would imagine, funkily rendered graphics. And yeah, you can see that some of the ground is rendered, some of it's not, and yeah, it's very, very oddly rendered indeed. But this is the introduction cutscene to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, running on Yuzu, this Nintendo Switch emulator. And yes, obviously it's super, super buggy, and super is not playable at all, but it is just really, really cool to see that you don't need a game save anymore, you don't crash when you load into a new game, and you can actually successfully load through the introduction cutscene and the introduction area of the game without crashing, and it's not actually running too bad. To be honest, I would consider 13 FPS playable in Breath of the Wild, be it on CMU, on the Wii U, on the Switch, anything. Obviously it's not going to run at those frame rates on the Wii U or the Switch, but I would definitely consider, especially on CMU if you're using FPS++, like 13 or 15 frames per second is definitely playable, especially when you consider that when CMU was booting Breath of the Wild for the first time, I think it was back in 1.8.0 or 1.7.5 maybe even, that I finished the game at, I think, 7 or 8 frames per second. Okay, so let's try to get back into gameplay again, and here we are in gameplay, and you can see that, well, some ground textures, I think it's mostly rocky textures, or not rock, maybe not textures, but some areas that are rocks are actually correctly being rendered, but you can see that this area just in front of Link is not being rendered at all. It's completely transparent. And in a very similar circumstance to what we saw on CMU, we are sinking into the ground, and there is probably going to be that bug where a lot of the grass and foliage is also sinking into the ground. It's so weird, but we can actually run on the ground. It's not like, it's not there. It's not like you fall through the ground like you would see on some games, like initially on Red Dead Redemption, on RPCS3, or on Xenia Emulator. So it's quite odd that even though the grass or the ground isn't rendered, that you can run on it. So it's very, very odd. Okay, so the next thing that I want to try to do is to try to run down the hill to the area just past the old man. I'm not going to give any spoilers for anyone who's not played Breath of the Wild. So let's just try run down the hill, and I'm going to try to make it so you can see some graphics while I'm doing this. So we've entered the blue zone. So what I want to try do is I want to try run down the hill and beat the very first bokoblin that you encounter. So performance wise, we're at pretty much 9 frames per second, which is basically meaning that we're going to be running at 1/3 game speed. So it's not ideal, obviously, but it's not playable, to be honest. But yeah. Okay, so oddly enough, you can see that the old man's beard is actually rendered, which is very, very odd. Do we have his character model rendered? Yeah, you can actually see that his character model is rendered. We don't seem to have fire effects rendered for some reason, which is very, very odd. And you can see that, obviously, as with everything else, not everything is being rendered correctly at all. Okay, so we should only have to run a small bit further down this hill, and we should encounter our very first bokoblin. It's really odd because I thought it was actually before here that you find it, but I think it might be just past this like tree stump on our left. So he should be like just here on our left. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's further down the hill. I'm not too sure. I definitely remember him being like closer. There he is. Yeah, there he is. Okay, so we actually do have enemy NPCs rendered, and he's not completely bugged out, which I kind of expected him to be. So let's just try to defeat him and try to see if we can see him in the first place. Okay, so I can only really take 2 hits, I think, if I remember correctly, so I'm going to have to play this kind of smart, and you can see that like with many other games on this emulator, you do encounter shader stutter when you're compiling your shaders into your GPU. So yeah, so we'll do our spin attack, we'll make him drop his tree branch, and then we should be able to switch to his tree branch and finish him off. Okay, so let's attack, and once more should kill him. No, once more again. No, we didn't crash. So we successfully were able to defeat our very first Bokoblin upon first booting Breath of the Wild on a Yuzu Emulator, which is probably in and of itself a fairly good achievement. So Breath of the Wild is now booting, and it is looking at least much better than it did yesterday or the day before. And if you guys remember what Super Mario Odyssey looked like probably a month or a month and a half ago, it was a very similar circumstance to this. And if you look at the state of Super Mario Odyssey right now, it is a fully playable game, and it is very accurately rendered as to how it is rendered on the Nintendo Switch itself. So who knows, it could only be a very short amount of time that we get Breath of the Wild fully playable on this Nintendo Switch emulator. So as I always say guys, if you want to help with the development of this emulator, you'll find a link to their Patreon down in the description of this video. All you have to do is head on over to that page, pledge to support them. As I said, it doesn't matter if you pledge $1 or $50, whatever you can afford to do. If you want to help to support these guys, please do so we get an even better emulator now and in the future. So once again guys, cheers for checking out this video. Remember to like it if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't, and as always, subscribe to the channel if you want to see all future videos from me.